In this video, we're going to be making a Super 8 or a double figure 8. This is our climbing knot at the Adventure Learning Center. This is what we always use to clip on to participants when they're climbing on the high ropes course. As you can see, it looks similar to our double figure 8 or our figure 8 follow through. If you've watched those videos or are familiar with those knots, the difference here is that we have 3 little wraps at the bottom. We still have our 2 that are at the top. I can rotate this around. We have a tail down here that's the same. Our carabiner loops are the same size, except now we have 2 carabiner loops up here at the top. So that's a little bit different. But we still have our classic figure 8 shape, and all the other pieces for inspection are the same. So it's straight when it's stacked. We don't have a rock in the middle. All of our rope lines are parallel without any intersections. Sometimes you have to pull up this bottom piece to really look inside to check to make sure they're parallel. Looks great. And our carabiner loops and our tail should be the same size as everything else, about a fist or a palm size. So let's learn how to tie this. I'm going to start by measuring out my knot length like I have with my other knots. It's going to be the same, about an arm's length from one hand to my shoulder. I'm going to place the rope between my thumb and my forefinger. My bite is up here at the top. So from that step where I measured from my hand stretched out to my right all the way to my left shoulder is how long I'm doing it. And where my rope stops at my left shoulder is right here where I'm pinching, and I'm going to bite the rope there, create a bite. That's what this fold is. If you watched our video on rope vocabulary or knot tying vocabulary, I'm going to pinch the rope between my thumb and my forefinger because this is where I would like my tail to end. And now I'm going to bring the bite down towards me over the front of my hand, and I'm going to direct the bite to the left, behind the rope to my right. I'm going to make sure that I'm not intersecting the rope as I'm going along. And now I'm going to rotate my knot gently to the right so that I can create that classic figure 8 shape. If you can see that, we have our 8. And now, instead of putting my bite through the top of the 8 like we would have with a figure 8 on a bite, I'm only going to push through the neck. So it's going to go just like this. We'll look at the side. This is what it looks like. Now, these 2 up here are where my carabiners are going to end up being, just like in our demo. All right, so from here, our bite is actually going to go over the top of our carabiner loops and travel down to the bottom of our knot. So that's what that looks like. This is much too big of a knot if we wanted to use this, but it's much easier to see in demonstration with some extra rope going on. So this is our knot. We're going to check out everything. Notice how as I'm tightening, I'm not pulling directly on the knot. I'm pulling on the carabiner loops in the tail to tighten everything up. My 2 carabiner loops at the top are even, so that when I put my carabiner through these, the carabiner will sit evenly on each of those loops and not on either one separately. My ropes are parallel as we go through. I can check underneath to make sure they're parallel under there as well and there aren't any hidden intersections. And our rope is stacked nicely. Now we know that our tail and our top loops are much too long at this point. So let's try this again. We're going to start over with a little bit less rope. So I'm measuring my rope and I'm going to create a bite. And then I'm going to put the rope between my thumb and forefinger to measure out my tail, and I'll bring the bite down towards me, towards that tail. It's going to move over to my left, to my right, and then I'm going to rotate the top of our forming 8 to the right just a little bit so I can get better access to the top of the 8. I'm going to place that bite over the top of my forming knot so I make my figure 8 shape. And now I'm going to push the neck of that bite through the top of the 8. And to finish it off, I'm going to move the bite over the top of the neck that's come through, all the way down to the bottom. Now you can see where I have some issues right now. I have an intersection that's happening, so I'm going to fix that real quick by just rotating that piece over. Sometimes that can be your quick fix, but sometimes it's not that easy. So you have to look through and make sure that that will be an appropriate fix for your knot, and that'll correct the intersection. As I'm looking, I'm checking to make sure my ropes are parallel. My carabiner loops are even. My carabiner loops are no bigger than my fist. My tail is a nice size, and everything falls in a nice straight line. So that's a great knot. Another way to see, as an example, I guess, of what a bad knot might look like in this step is I have seen some really great super overhand knots. So you always want to be checking to make sure you have a classic figure 8 shape while you're checking. You have to be able to see that figure 8 or you don't have a figure 8 knot. That's the easiest first way to tell. So here's one. It kind of looks like a bowline, I guess. But here's a super bowline or a super overhand knot with some double loops at the top. This is not a figure 8 because we can't see that classic figure 8 shape. We just have kind of a twist with a loop. All right, so that's one that's not correct. Let's look at that super 8 step one more time quickly. So I'm measuring it out. I created a bite. I measure out my tail next. Bring my bite down in front of my hand, in front of my palm. Move the bite to the left, behind and to the right. I'm going to gently turn my left hand material to my right so I can see the top of the 8. I'll lay that bite end over the top, check everything out before I push that neck only through the top of the 8. And now I'm going to pull the bite over the top of those carabiner loops to finish off my knot. And then one last step as I'm checking through, I noticed that I had an intersection that can be easily fixed by moving my tail end over. So that's our Super 8.